Council meeting on Tuesday, March 15th, 2022. I'm Mayor Ashley Stolzman, and because of COVID-19, this meeting is being held electronically and is being recorded. To request permission to speak during public comment periods, a participant can raise their hand by clicking the raise hand icon, which you'll find at the bottom of your panel. If you've dialed in by phone, you can dial *9 and we'll see a raised hand appear on your behalf. When I call on a member of the public and the clerk unmute you, you'll need to tell us your name, your address, and your comments. If you'd like to talk on a different topic, just go ahead and raise your hand again when the next topic arises. Thank you for helping to maintain meeting decorum by following these rules. City Clerk Muth, could we please have a roll call?
Mayor Stolzman?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Here.
Councilmember Brown?
Here.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Here.
Councilmember Fahey?
Here.
Councilmember Lay?
Here.
Councilmember Moe?
Here.
Thank you, everyone. Could I please get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. The motion's approved. That takes us to our public comment period for items that are not on our agenda tonight. If any members of the public have a comment on an item that's not on our agenda, please raise your hand and let us know what you'd like to tell us. First, we have RJ Harrington.
Good evening, council neighbors. RJ Harrington, 457 East Raintree Court. A thought for the evening. In the midst of our city's response, recovery, soon to be rebuilding efforts from the Marshall Fire, in the midst of the Ukraine crisis, in the midst of all the other crises that are occurring, the IPCC, International Panel on Climate Change, released its 2022 report. By far the most dire warning it has yet produced. The report made it very clear that we must take firm measures now, with no delay, to cut back on the use of fossil fuels and to move toward renewable energy. The warnings received brief notice, and then our strange species returned to devoting scarce resources to destruction and rapidly increasing its poisoning of the atmosphere, while blocking efforts for extricating itself from its suicidal path. I'll close this rendition of my public notice with the litany against fear. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. With full credit to author Frank Herbert. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Josh Cooperman.
Hi, this is Josh Cooperman. I live at 216 Griffith Street. First, I'd like to echo RJ Harrington's comments. Secondly, I'd like to make a comment about the previous council meeting. At this meeting, a few Lewisville citizens expressed the opinion that only Lewisville residents should be entitled to participate in the conversation around building codes, and perhaps more generally. I found these comments not only disheartening and dismaying, but also inappropriate and inconsiderate. First of all, city council meetings are public hearings open to all, regardless of place of residence. And the First Amendment guarantees anyone the right to speak their mind at a city council meeting. Second, all of the commenters who were not Lewisville residents offered constructive assistance to aid our city's recovery from the Marshall Fire. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said of all of the comments from Lewisville residents. Third, Lewisville does not exist in and of itself. We are always interacting and working with our surrounding communities and the larger world. Specifically, building codes do not exist in isolation for Lewisville. Our decisions on building codes affect our surrounding communities and the larger world. I believe that Lewisville is not an insular community. As such, we should always welcome advice and assistance from those beyond our immediate community. And similarly, we should always offer our constructive advice and assistance to those beyond our immediate community. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment on items not on our agenda, that takes us to our consent agenda. I've requested that we remove item D and E from the consent agenda and move them to the regular agenda. They concern the license plate detection software from the Flock Group and the contract for the concrete replacement. So we'll go ahead and move those after item G on the agenda. Any other comments or discussion on consent agenda? Seeing none, I move we approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. That takes us to our council informational comments on pertinent items not on the agenda. I just want to let everyone know from a process standpoint, and most people do know, because a lot of folks have attended a lot of our council meetings, that when we have an ordinance that we take up, we have two readings of it. The first reading, we set the date for the public hearing and the debate and discussion of the ordinance. So tonight you'll see toward the end of our agenda, we have a few first readings, and the purpose of those will be to set hearing dates. And the hearing dates for both of those are the 5th of April. And so I don't want people to anticipate that there will be a lot of discussion on those topics, as the point of them this evening is to set a hearing date at a later time. Any other council informational comments? Seeing none, that takes us to our city manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I just have one update for council. The Director of Parks, Recreation, and Open Space position, the recruitment, the application process concluded at 5 o'clock yesterday on the 14th. And I'm very pleased that we have received 46 applicants, which is a good number in today's environment. And initial review suggests we have some high caliber candidates to consider. So I'm excited to share that news and to move that process along. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, City Manager Durbin. And that takes us to our first item of regular business this evening, which is discussion direction on our intergovernmental agreement with Boulder County and the town of Superior regarding debris removal. We have our city attorney, Kathleen Kelly, here to tell us a little bit about what we're taking up, and then we'll have public comment on this topic and council comments, and then discussion direction. I just do want to point out that the plan this evening is to get questions on the table, information that people need to see for next week, and then we'll be taking it up next Monday. So the final action wouldn't be until next week. City Attorney Kelly, please let us know what you'd like to tell us.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Well, as the council knows, the Boulder County applied to and received approval from FEMA to do a significant amount of debris removal work in the city of Lewisville, the town of Superior, and unincorporated areas of Boulder County that were affected by the Marshall Fire. Boulder County went through a procurement process and awarded a bid for that contract to DRC Emergency Services, LLC. The IGA is between the city of Lewisville, town of Superior, and Boulder County, and covers how Superior and Lewisville will pay for their local match portion of this debris removal, assign some project representatives, and just basically provide the framework for how the debris removal work will be conducted in each of those areas. On page 154 of your packet, the second page of the council communication, there's a breakdown of the estimated costs per jurisdiction. That's one of the areas that we are seeking some direction from the city council on this evening, because there is the opportunity for DRC to do some work that is not going to be reimbursed by FEMA. And so we need to know what aspects of that work the council would like to include in the IGA. The other thing to note is that these figures on page 154 of the packet are based on a 12.5% local match. We did find out last Friday that in the federal spending bill, it was approved that the FEMA reimbursement for all of these Marshall Fire recovery costs will be reimbursed at 90% instead of 75%. So the city's contribution should only be 5%. The state of Colorado is providing the other 5% match. So we're hopeful that that bill will be signed by President Biden before we finalize the IGA so that we can actually provide a not to exceed number that reflects that 5% plus, whatever non-reimbursed costs the city wants to include in the IGA for DRC work. If not, the version of the draft IGA in your packet has some language in it that addresses, and I left it in red line so it would be easy to spot. It's on page 161 of your packet that essentially says that, if FEMA adjusts the percentage of reimbursement, that, all of the costs will be adjusted accordingly under the IGA. But again, our hope is that we have a new, good, firm number to put in the not to exceed amount in the IGA. The last item is, I'm sure you are all aware of the lawsuit that was filed against Boulder County alleging some open meetings law violations. There's a hearing this Friday, March 18th in the district court regarding that lawsuit and the plaintiff's request for a preliminary injunction. So hopefully we will have some news on the direction that that lawsuit will take. The county has requested that the court accelerate the trial on the merits and just hear all of the issues on Friday. So hopefully that will happen, and hopefully we will have a decision from the court by the time we meet next again on March 21st. But the goal here is for us to have everything lined up so that if the county is able to approve the contract on the 22nd, meaning that it went well for them in court, that both Superior and Lewisville are ready to go as well. And I was informed today that the Superior Town Board approved the IGA in essentially the form that it's in now, gave some authority to the town attorney to make some minor adjustments, such as the percentage reimbursement and the final figures. And they did that last night. So here for questions, and as I said, hoping to get some direction on items to be included in the costs.
Thank you, City Attorney Kelly, for that report out. And then City Manager Durbin, if you could just tell us a little bit about sort of how you've envisioned the work with the contractor and the flat work and the items that aren't included, and how people might be able to opt in or opt out. Because we've got a lot of public feedback already to this point on some people want to keep their driveways, other people want them removed. And just could you tell us a little bit about how you've been working toward a potential path forward?
Yeah, we actually had a very constructive meeting this afternoon with the contractor, along with CDR McGuire, which is the firm that the state has hired as a debris monitoring firm. So they'll be out there keeping an eye on the contractor. We talked through a number of issues. This is things like patios, trees, retaining walls, all the things that are not eligible for FEMA reimbursement, essentially. And it's my hope, I guess, that within the next couple days we can clarify this for people. As I've been saying for the last couple of weeks, I think property owners have they deserve to know that, what the expectations are going forward. We need to be able to answer that clearly and consistently. And I don't think we've been there for a while, and I'm frustrated by that. But I think we made a lot of progress this afternoon, and we'll be talking tomorrow. City Attorney, there might be some things we need to talk about as relates to the IGA. That we might need to amend in as relates to that conversation. And trying to define the other part of that is, what are the costs related to those things? Because as I understand from today, those costs might be different than what was in the proposal relating to specifically FEMA eligible reimbursement. And the challenge is that if we mix all this material together, we can compromise the FEMA reimbursement. So we need to separate out these materials and make sure we do it in a clearly accountable fashion. So we're making progress, but I still don't have a solid answer, unfortunately, on that.
Thank you, City Manager Durbin. Any council questions before we go to public comment? Councilmember Most.
Yeah, I just have a question about that $55,304 number per lot. If I don't know whether City Manager Durbin can clarify this, or our City Attorney Kelly can clarify it. I thought I understood that each lot was going to be assessed based on the tonnage. Is that true, or are we assigning a value to each lot? Because clearly there's going to be differences between, houses with, 4,000, 5,000 square foot houses versus, 2,000 square foot houses in different cities. So can either one of you address how that's going to be handled?
Yeah, I can start. Initially, while the RFP was still pending and we were waiting on proposals, my anticipation was that this would be based upon volume or tonnage, like you suggested there. The proposal that is moving forward at this point is based on a per lot expenditure. Our Public Works Director is on somewhere here, and he might be able to talk more specifically about the differences in terms of how that played out. Kurt, are you available to answer that?
I am available.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, the bids that were reviewed do have a per parcel cost, kind of a flat fee on some bid line items. And then there's also a variable rate on other line items based off tonnages, like for instance, concrete, or in regards to like trees, different diameters of tree sizes. So some of those variable costs would be recognized. You'd recognize the different lot sizes through some of those variable costs. And then some of the lot sizes would be kind of a flat fee throughout. And without kind of a table to explain it, it's kind of, that's the best explanation I can give you at a high level.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? All right, thank you. We'll take public comment on this topic now. Any members of the public that would like to make any comments on this agenda topic, please raise your hand at this time. Then tell us your name and your address and tell us what you'd like to tell us. Seeing none, that takes us back over for council discussion on this topic and direction. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, City Attorney Kelly and City Manager Durbin. This is one of the things that I take very seriously. Our fiduciary responsibility and our duty around this is to make sure that this is a solid contract, and it's something that, as we're working with our partners, and I stress partners on this, this needs to be something that works for the municipalities as well as the county. And so I appreciate everybody's work on this. I appreciate the town of Superior has moved ahead. I'm not ready to move ahead because I think there's still some questions to be answered. Councilor Most mentioned some things, and I know there's been discussions about how we calculate costs, and so I know that the city manager is working on this, and that's information I think that we need to have so that we can make some decisions around this. Attorney Kelly pointed out on page 154 of our packet the items that are included with some estimated costs. I think that's a good round number to be thinking about it, but I'd like to bring up the issue of the non-eligible cost. I believe it's important that we address those. We address those up front. And so flat work, driveways, outbuildings, soil sampling, I think we need to understand what that means as far as cost and whether or not we want to make sure it gets included. Without knowing the numbers, I'm in the position I'd like to advocate including those so that we don't leave a driveway that now won't work with a new house or something like that, and then it's a burden on the homeowner who's now spent all their debris removal money. The other thing, and this is a question for City Manager Durbin, you talked about trees. There is landscaping on a lot of these lots. And where does that fit in here? Is that something that's a non-eligible cost that could be included?
Correct, that's correct. The trees that burned and are dead and present a hazard would be eligible costs. So those would be removed as part of the program currently. Other landscaping, smaller trees, things under 6 inches in diameter, essentially, or other burned up landscaping could be included as a non-eligible cost. We
Okay,
talked
so
about those items today.
thank you. So when you do your financial analysis on this, I'd like to see a line item where we try to estimate what that might be. And I know that's going to be really, really hard to do, but I want to at least have a sense for what that is, so we can understand what our potential liability would be if we include all of these or some of these non-eligible costs. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. So I'll just try to summarize what I heard you say, and then if folks agree, we can start by saying we agree or we want to modify Mayor Pro Tem Maloney's approach, because I think there'll be quite a lot of agreement about what I heard you say. So I think what I heard you say is when our city attorney brings this back, you'd like to see the not exceed number to include these non-eligible costs, but we want detail that shows the line item accountability for these non-eligible costs and the math of the estimate of how it got there. And we'd like to see as many details from the contract and the line item costs as we can, so that we can recreate the numbers in this part of the contract. Is that essentially what you were proposing, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney? Sorry, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Yes, you said it better than I did. But the other thing is, I just want to make sure we have a landscaping, trees, whatever the topic is, one of those lines as well. That would be the only thing I would add to what you said.
Okay, so on the non-eligible cost, it includes the flat work, which is like paths and patios, driveway, outbuilding, soil sampling, and landscaping are the
Correct.
areas that we want to see detailed out. Thank you. So that's sort of a starting point for discussion for folks. Councilmember Lay.
Yes, my comments were similar to Pro Tem Maloney, so I'm not going to repeat those, as revised and firmed out by the mayor. But I had a question really about one of the numbers that is in there. We, excuse me. Let's see, it's in section 7 on page 160, and our number for projected costs is blank. I'm curious as to how or where the town of Superior's number came from. Do you know?
City Manager Durbin or City Attorney Kelly.
I don't have their math. Do you, Kathleen?
I don't have their exact math, but just in speaking with their town attorney, I know that they took the estimate that they were given that's on page 154 of our packet, which was essentially $2.4 million, and just escalated that by an amount of just over $1 million to come to that number, because they don't have any better figures than we do on the non-eligible costs. They were just trying to make sure that they captured enough under the agreement, but also had an outside limit to what their exposure would be to costs under the agreement.
Okay, and all of that's good. I too would like a little more specificity, though, in the way that the mayor and the mayor pro tem have outlined. So let's. But I also want to say, though, that the best news of the week is that FEMA bumped up that number, or I should say the Congress is willing to do that. I know there's a lot of work that went into that. I know that there are people in both houses of Congress that were responsible for that, and we owe them a debt of gratitude, and hopefully we'll be able to thank the president for signing that into law very soon, because that's good for our taxpayers.
Thank you, Councilmember Lay. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. I'm very supportive of including the non-eligible, what do we call it? Non-eligible costs, and as many as we can afford. I think it's prudent to try to get better estimates of that. But I also want to ask the city manager, will we have those by next week when we consider this? I assume we will, right? Or no?
Yeah, I'm going to say yes.
Okay. I think that would be helpful. I'd like to move forward, I think, as quickly as possible. on this, especially if the county is in a position to approve, to work to, to finally approve the contractor's work, if that makes sense. So yeah, everything the Mayor Pro Tem said and the mayor said.
Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Councilmember Most.
I'm just a little bit confused about the numbers of houses destroyed, because I've actually seen different numbers in print. Is this the official number? For some reason, I don't know why 560 is sticking out to me, and I just saw another. There's something else that said 550 destroyed and 43 damaged. Is this 524? Is that? And I know we had talked earlier about houses that still had walls standing that we weren't sure about eligibility. So is this 524 number the total number, or are there other houses that still have undetermined status because there's a wall standing or something?
Councilmember Most, just for people following along, do you have a page number?
Do I have a page number? I'm actually not looking at the full packet. I'm looking at the one that I linked to because I can't. So I don't, page 2 of 3 in the discussion direction, debris removal IGA, where it talks about the total number of homes destroyed. It says Lewisville 524, Superior 353, and the county 141. I've just seen different numbers published. And again, I'm just wondering if that is that the actual 524? Is that our official number or?
No, it's not.
Okay.
Yeah, that's on page 154 if you're looking for it in the packet.
Okay, thanks for that.
And I'm looking for our expert on these numbers, which I think is Lisa Ritchie.
Hey, Lisa.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. So yeah, there is some work that we need to do to understand the addresses that didn't make this list. We talked about this at our meeting this afternoon. So this will be, there is an understanding, I think, of which homes met the FEMA requirement versus which homes we think should have an expectation of being included within this program. So within this additional detail, this is on our list to include.
And then we could also start subtracting out, there's about 105 properties that have already opted out of this program. So we can start moving them into a different bucket as well.
Okay, because it seems to me that before we sign this agreement, we should have those numbers as certainly as accurate as possible.
So we'll add that to the list of things that we would hope to see on Monday, if possible, City Manager Durbin.
Yeah, I just would, and City Attorney Kelly's probably going to say this anyways, but remember, this is a not to exceed number that we're talking about, not the actual expenditure.
Thank you. So I just want to say a couple of things. I want to thank our city staff, our city attorney, for really working rapidly to make sure that we don't hold the county's project, start date up. We have been turning around all of the dates that they've laid out for us. So the county's soonest possible time of signing this is next Tuesday. And so our path forward to get all our questions answered and to make sure that we've structured this in a responsible way is in no way holding anything up. So I want to thank the staff for making sure that that is happening, because we've laid out these North Stars for our process, that safety and speed and urgency are critical. And so I want to thank the staff for taking that in serious consideration, and then also for just making sure that we do understand the details and that we do have a good contract at the end of the day. So thank you for all your work on this. Is everybody clear on the direction we've laid out to this point in the meeting? City Attorney Kelly, are there other points you're hoping to have answered for facilitating the completion of this IGA?
No, I don't think so. What we'll bring back to you, hopefully we'll have all of the costs for those non-eligible costs, and we'll bring back to you an estimate that includes all of those, but also identified. So if there's anything that the council decides to remove, that can be easily done before approval of the agreement. And of course, we're all waiting to see what happens in court on Friday.
Thank you. Yes, so and if the 90-10 split has been signed by then, it would be nice to have that reflected in the contract as well.
Yes, absolutely.
Any other direction from folks this evening on this topic? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, and we will take this up on Monday. Next on our agenda, we have resolution number 16, series 2022, a resolution approving a business assistance agreement with Base Camp Lewisville LLC for an economic development project in the city of Lewisville. Our Economic Vitality Director, Megan Pierce, is with us this evening to tell us about this exciting opportunity. Megan?
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, City Council. As you mentioned, I'm here to present a business assistance package for Base Camp Lewisville LLC. They are doing business as Ironton Distillery. The distillery and craft house is currently located in Denver. They opened there in 2018. Unfortunately, their current site is subject to redevelopment and they will no longer be able to keep their distillery operations in the current location. So they're considering moving and redeveloping the existing space at 1303 Empire Road in Lewisville. A little bit more background on the project. The planned relocation would occupy the existing 4,000 square feet of commercial space. The applicant also plans to redevelop the property in general to add additional square footage, incorporating indoor and outdoor space, as well as room for distillery operations. There has not been a sales tax generating use in this commercial space since at least 2017. And the applicant anticipates that construction would be complete and operations able to begin in 2023. There would be approximately 30 employees working at the distillery and the supporting operations with an average job salary of $30,000. Staff finds that the project meets our business assistance program criteria in that it brings new basic jobs to the city. We anticipate that it would draw new customers and not significantly detract customers from our existing businesses. It would create new sales tax revenue to the city, and it would utilize an existing building and redevelop it in certainly a much more productive manner. The proposed assistance package that you'll see outlined in your memo includes a 50% rebate of building permit fees, sign permit fees, and construction use tax. Those rebates would be capped at $30,000 based on the applicant's estimates. We also propose a 50% rebate on new sales tax that would be generated over a 5-year period. That would be capped at $207,000. And we've extended the project termination here a little bit to September 30th of 2024. They do anticipate opening in 2023, but sometimes things get complicated or redevelopment lags. So we've just provided them a bit more time to work on the project. And then as we normally do with our assistance packages, we do have a clawback provision in the agreement. Given the significance of the rebates, the business would need to remain in Lewisville for 10 years or be subject to pay back a percentage of the rebates received. In terms of the financial impact, we estimate that the building permit fees, sign permit fees, and construction use tax paid by the applicant would be a little over $62,000. And we'd estimate that we would rebate a little less than $28,000. So that ties out to that $30,000 cap. And then based on the estimates of sales tax revenue the applicant has provided, they would be paying close to $504,000 in sales tax over a 5-year period, and we would rebate up to $207,000. So there's a financial impact to the city of just under $235,000 over that 5 years. Staff recommends adopting the business assistance package with Base Camp Lewisville LLC, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Economic Vitality Director Pierce. Any questions from folks? Seeing none, that takes us to public comment on this topic. Any members of the public care to comment on this project? Seeing none, that takes us back over for council discussion and action on this topic this evening. Any council discussion? Councilmember Brown.
Thanks, Mayor. This is an exciting opportunity. It's always nice to see a nice, fairly large sales tax generating business in our community. And so I'd like to move that we approve resolution number 16, series 2022,
I
Is there a
second.
Second. Oh, you got it, Maxine.
Councilmember Most will second it. Thank you. Any discussion on the motion from other folks? I don't know if the applicant's on this evening or wanted to make any comments, but when we are usually in person and see you, just like to thank you for considering our community and look forward to seeing what you're able to do with the space. Any other discussion from members? Seeing none, City Clerk Muse, could we please have a roll call vote on the motion? Oh, I'm sorry, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. No?
I saw that Deb put her hand up. That's why I pointed over.
Oh, I saw a hand flash. I
Yeah.
apologize. Councilmember Fahey?
It's different places on everybody's
I
screen.
know, right? Yeah, yeah.
It's
It's
not
over
the
there.
match game here, you know?
I was just going to mention that I think it's wonderful that they're not only coming to Lewisville, but they're coming into an existing structure. And so I'm excited to welcome them to town.
Thank you, Councilmember Fahey. Well said. City Clerk Muse, could we please have a roll call vote on the motion?
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney,
Yes.
Councilmember Lake,
Yes.
Mayor Stolzman,
Yes.
Councilmember Most,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown,
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson,
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. That takes us to our next order of business this evening, which is resolution number 17, series 2022, a resolution approving a 3-year extension to the approval of the terrace on Main Street planned unit development. I'll open the public hearing and ask council members if there are any disclosures. Seeing none, I'll turn it over to our senior planner, Lisa Ritchie.
Good evening again, Mayor and City Council. Give me one moment while I share my screen. I just have a very brief presentation for you. Well, there it is. Too many tabs. Okay. All right. So there we go. Again, tonight you're here to consider Resolution 17 that would authorize an extension for 3 years of the approval of the terraces on Main Plan Unit Development. All public notice requirements under the code have been met. A little bit of context for you. This property is located on the 700 block of Main Street, just north of Pine Street and a little bit south and across the street from City Hall. In the image on the screen below you reflects the elevation that would front Main, just to help reorient your memory on the project. But the project, the Terraces on Main Plan Unit Development, was approved on March 19th of 2019. LRC and City Council subsequently approved a tax increment rebate agreement later that year in 2019. And then the applicant is also working with Megan Pierce to make an amendment to that agreement. It's essentially kind of authorizing an extension, but not redoing the finances. And that will be coming in front of you in April is the anticipated date. So for tonight, for the PUD, where the applicant is requesting up to 3 years, March 15th, 2025. From a procedural perspective, this requires the same process as initial public or the initial approval, which requires public hearings. This went to Planning Commission in February and received unanimous support. And when we look at these types of extension requests, generally city staff reviews policies that were in place at the time of adoption to understand if any policies and regulations have changed during that time. And we did not identify any adopted policy or plan that would regulate this project any differently than it was in 2019. So we find that it continues to meet the applicable policies and regulations. Therefore, we are recommending approval of this 3-year extension. The applicant is on and they would like to share with you more around their rationale for why the project hasn't gotten built to date and their desire to move forward. So Mr. David Zinke with Boulder Creek Neighborhoods is on, and I'm also available for any questions you may have.
Thank you. Planning. I saw your name written with a different title today, and so that's why I am stumbling on your title. Thank you very much. And so we'll turn it over to Mr. Zinke.
Good evening. Are you guys hearing me okay?
We can hear you.
Great. Good evening, Mayor and Council. David Zinke, Boulder Creek Neighborhoods, 712 Main Street, Lewisville, Colorado. Thank you for taking time to review our request tonight. I know you have many important topics to focus on. I have little to add to staff's overview. As many of you know, we worked on this project for around 2.5 years, and we were able to design and approve the redevelopment at 712, 722 Main Street. I remain very pleased with the outcome of that collaborative process and we had hoped to have been well under construction by now. Unfortunately, due to the impacts of COVID on our office operations and significant changes to retail and office rents, we are delayed in our effort on the project. We had planned to update the building bidding this past September in coordination with our company's return to the office, but the late fall winter COVID surge blunted those efforts. We anticipate improving circumstances will be forthcoming, and I'm pleased to report in the past few weeks we've seen a rapid return of our employees back to the office space, which is great. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. I do have some of the project numbers that were associated with the original request for the tax rebate, which I'm happy to touch on or answer any other questions. Yeah, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinke. Any council members have questions? I just, Planner Ritchie, I just have a question. We're not taking up any part of the LRC action or the rebate this evening. Is that right? Like that's not relevant to the discussion this evening. Okay, and so the information about not redoing the math is also not anything to do with our discussion tonight.
Exactly. It's not part of the criteria. This is strictly the PUD. Just
Okay.
a little heads up.
When we talk about that, I guess I'll just have questions about, like, you know, the urban renewal period ends at a time. And so, you know, getting closer to the end, I'll just want to understand better why we wouldn't redo the analysis, since the window of time to receive those proceeds shrinks, and it's a substantial fraction of the remaining time to move out 3 years. So I have questions around that, but it's irrelevant to the discussion this evening. It just was brought up by both of you. Councilmember Dickinson.
I put my hand down, Mayor. I'm good.
Okay. Any members of the public care to comment on this agenda item this evening? All right, seeing none, take it back over for council questions and comments. Councilmember Dickinson.
I'm unmuted. Great. Yeah, thanks. It's funny. This was before council when I was running for office, and I was paying a lot of attention to stuff happening. And so this is a project that I was excited to see improved and approved, and I appreciate that you guys have done a minor facelift with the. I appreciate that they have done a minor facelift with the paint job and stuff on the front. But I think this is an awesome project to have come to our Main Street. I hope it does come, and I think that it was well thought out, and I certainly support continuing it. I don't know if it happens, but I certainly can support continuing this as a project that we hope to see come to Main Street. So I'll support this.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
I don't know if my colleague made a motion or not, but if not, I will make a motion to approve Resolution 17, Series 2022. This is thank you. This is something that got strong support at the previous council in 2019. There was another discussion that we're not taking up tonight, but the building, we went through a couple of iterations. I supported both of those. This is a good project for downtown, and I hope the extension ensures that it can be built. Thank you.
Any council member discussion? Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate that. I went back, since the criteria for adopting a PUD extension are the same as approving the original PUD in the first place. I went back to the original packet on March 19th of 2019 and went through all of the criteria, and I find that I concur with the assessment of staff. I find it consistent with the PUD criteria, and therefore I will vote to approve the extension.
Any other council discussion? I still find that a number of the criteria are not satisfied. I think it's clear that there's extensive glass on the third story, which isn't allowed, and other things that aren't allowed, but in the spirit of the extension and that the council approved it, I find that it's acceptable to grant an extension to something that the council approved. Any other council discussion on the topic? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. The resolution 17 for an extension is approved. That takes us to item D in our packet, which is resolution 18 series 2022, a resolution amending the 22 budget by amending appropriations in our general fund, open space and parks fund, cemetery fund, historical preservation fund, recreation fund, capital projects fund, water utility fund, wastewater utility fund, stormwater utility fund, solid waste and recycling fund, golf course fund, and additional appropriations within such funds, and adjusting budget revenue in the water utility fund, wastewater utility fund, stormwater utility fund, and solid waste and recycling fund. This is our public hearing as advertised in the Daily News on the 13th of March, 2022, and I'll open the public hearing and ask if there are any disclosures. Seeing none, I'll turn it over to our Finance Director, Kevin Watson, for a brief presentation. Good evening, Director Watson.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. I know we have a long agenda this evening, so I'm just going to make a couple of comments and then I'll be happy to try and answer any of your questions. First, due to the changes in priorities and the resource allocations brought about by the Marshall Fire, staff expects significant changes to the 2022 budget that the council originally adopted in November. The amendment presented here tonight is just the first in a series of amendments that are expected throughout the year. This amendment contains only those items that are currently known and are reasonably quantifiable at this point. The intent tonight is just to get legal authorization for the expenditures that have already been incurred or have been approved to be incurred. So with that, just so you kind of know what the scope of this amendment is all about, I'll be happy to try and answer any questions or discuss any of the information provided in greater detail. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Watson. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Director. And thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director, for putting this together. I have one rather specific question. A couple of weeks ago, I gave staff a heads up that the airport noise roundtable was considering changing its fee structure and dues. And in my read of the amendment, I just wanted to make sure that I hadn't missed something. Is a potential change in the airport roundtable fee structure and what we would pay to that group included in this amendment, or is that coming potentially in a future amendment?
Well, I'm sorry. That's included within the amendment, and you can see that on page 224 if you go into detail of Appendix A.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Excellent. Thank you, Director Watson. Great question, Councilmember Brown. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Director Watson, for the presentation. I just want to make a few comments on behalf of the Finance Committee. We reviewed this at our meeting on February 21st, and one of the questions, and Director Watson alluded to this, is, should we be waiting on these budget amendments or should we do them routinely? It was the recommendation of the Finance Committee that we do these routinely. So it's possible that we could be seeing budget adjustments several times this year, which would be unprecedented. But I think it's important that we do that so that we're authorizing the spending of the money in an appropriate way. So you will see more of these, and we're going to have to balance understanding that and cash flow and a lot of other things like that. But just a heads up, that is the direction that we chose. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. Councilmember Most.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. I also think it's really critically important to do this in this way because it also provides transparency for the community, for our community to understand that the impacts to the Marshall Fire are not just to a significant number of our homeowners, but to the city as a whole, and that this is affecting the entire community, and that I think the Finance Committee is doing a great job, and I think our Finance Director and City Manager and all our folks are doing a great job in really understanding what the impacts are, of keeping track of them, of trying to get reimbursement where we can, but to really just let the community know, this is going to be an ongoing process that really impacts all of us. So thank you for all the work.
Thank you. That takes us to our public comment period for this agenda topic. Any members of the public care to comment? Seeing none, that takes us back over for council questions and comments. Councilmember Fahey.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Director Watson. I think this is a critical thing for us to be doing right now, and I really appreciate the way it's being done. And I just wanted to, in addition to thanking the director and how this is proceeding and the Finance Committee for their work on how to proceed with these expenses, I'd also like to thank the former council that arranged for us to have enough reserve funds to be able to do this and to weather a catastrophe. So thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Councilmember Fahey. Councilmember Brown.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and move Resolution 18, Series 2022.
For a second.
Second.
Thank you. Any more discussion or questions or comments? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask City Clerk Muth for a roll call vote on the motion.
Mayor Stolzman,
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey,
Yes.
Councilmember Most,
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson,
Yes.
Councilmember Lay,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney,
Yes.
Councilmember Brown.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Next on our agenda, we have discussion direction, remote public participation for council meetings. We'll have a staff presentation from our city clerk, Meredith Muth. City Clerk Muth.
Good evening, everyone. As you all know, we have the council has decided to return to meeting in person in April. We'll start on April 5th. Staff is requesting direction tonight on if you'd like to continue to allow the public to attend and provide comments both in person and via, in our case, but remotely, but via Zoom. The current city council rules of procedure allow for electronic meetings, but really only in an event related to the pandemic or a health emergency. And the rules also basically assume that all the participants, council members and the public would be attending remotely. So what we're asking for tonight is if you'd like to continue to allow the public to attend and give comments remotely, we'd like direction to bring back some changes to the rules of procedure to allow that. During the pandemic, we did make upgrades to the broadcast system and council chambers, so we are able to integrate a Zoom meeting with an in-person meeting of council. And we feel that allowing remote participation gives our currently displaced members a little more access to our meetings, which they may not have if they're not living locally. Additionally, remote participation supports the city's equity efforts and increases ability for people to attend meetings and give comments. I would like to note that the public is always encouraged, if you can't come to a meeting, even if you can come to a meeting, but you're welcome to present any comments you have to the city council via email. All those comments are considered part of the public record and are included in all the packet addenda. So we encourage residents to do that. It also makes you can speak for as long as you'd like to council in an email, and in person you may be limited to 3 minutes. So we would like to clarify that and make sure people know that's always an option, regardless of how we're meeting. But this evening, staff is just looking for direction, discussion, whatever you guys would like to do with public participation moving forward from here.
Thank you, City Clerk Muth. So I guess I'll first take it to public comment on this topic. Any members of the public care to comment? First, we have RJ Harrington. RJ, I can't hear you.
I'm getting too quick on my hand lowering. Ms. Mayor, RJ Harrington, 457 East Raintree Court. I fully support the capability of residents to attend remotely. Although I did not hear City Clerk Muth directly reference this, what I understand is that we'd be looking at a hybrid situation. Hypothetically, those of us that wanted to attend in person might be able to. If that's not the case, please provide some clarity. Also, I wanted to remark that although I don't think that the city's wastewater system is being tested, there are rashes of the latest BA.2 subvariant of Omicron, popping up in a whole lot of wastewater systems. And various cities and countries around the world are already flowing back into lockdown. So I would strongly suggest that flexibility remain the order of the day in the event that either this or another variant starts to take hold and become not only additionally transmissible, but potentially harmful again. We're all going to have to stay on our toes. I can tell you that if I decide to show up in person, if that will be permitted, that I will certainly have my mask on to not only protect you all, but protect any immunocompromised person I may happen to encounter after the fact. So I fully support not only being able to see each other face to face, even if it's just the council, but for us to be able to participate remotely is highly valuable. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other public comment on this topic, we'll take it back over for council discussion. And just for folks' information, we have been testing our wastewater. We actually were one of the very first in the country to be testing our wastewater in an MIT study. And you can see our data on the CDPHE site, along with the other cities in Colorado that are testing our wastewater for COVID. And it's a great indicator of how much COVID is present in our community. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, RJ, for your comments. I essentially agree with RJ Harrington. I think that what we need to do going forward is providing as much flexibility and accessibility as possible. You know, the world is different than it was when the rules were written, when the only way you could do it was to be in person, and it was broadcast on Channel 8, and we've gone through some iterations there, but I don't think things are going to be, we'll ever go back to that. So I would like to see us to ensure that we have a remote public participation. I would like to see us also have the flexibility as council members, whether we're traveling or whatever our situation is. And I, like RJ, you know, as a caregiver, I'm concerned about meeting in person. And if I could participate remotely via Zoom and still be part of the council and an acting member, that's what I would like to do. I'd like that flexibility. So that's my feeling. And I think that the technology is there. And so I would like to see, I'd like to hear what the rest of the council thinks. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. Councilmember Most.
I agree 100% with the Mayor Pro Tem. I think that this kind of hybrid flexibility should be available for the council as well. As a solo working parent that sometimes has to travel on business, I want to be able to have the ability to continue my responsibilities as a council member, even if I happen to be out of town. And I think that I know there are quite a few of us here who have also full-time jobs that sometimes we have to travel. And as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, I know also Council Member Fahey takes care of her grandchildren. So I think this kind of flexibility going forward would be great for everyone. And it would really, I think it would allow people who might not even consider running for city council to consider running for city council, because it would give them some flexibility, you know, if you have small children or something. So I think this is a win-win for everybody. So I'd like to see it for the council and the community.
Thank you, Councilmember Most. Councilmember Dickinson.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. We've been talking about this for a couple of years, on and off. But yeah, I definitely think that what we've learned, I'm not going to say anything super new today, but I think what we've learned in these last 2 years is that the participation has skyrocketed, and people are able to participate when they otherwise couldn't, or just didn't have the energy to come all the way down to City Hall. And this makes it a lot easier. I think engagement is so important. Almost every email I send back to someone, whether they're angry with me or happy with me, I'm like, thanks for your engagement. Like I appreciate that people are engaged right now. And so I think it is absolutely critical from an EDI perspective and from just a general engagement perspective that we do everything we can to just multiply the opportunities for people to be present in the room. And that's maybe, you know, a silver lining for COVID is, you know, making sure that that's a priority for us moving forward. I'm conflicted on the council piece. I agree with exactly what Councilmember Most just said. I would love to be gone and still participate. It's such a nice thing to be there. It's better than not being there at all. But it does seem like it's, so I'm curious on that part. I'm curious on how council participates when not present, as opposed to just the public participating, and we're all seeing that. So really curious to see if that's easy, difficult, and how other council people feel about that role. I think that was when we were first thinking about coming back. I was like, oh, well, you can stay home while we go in. And I was like, oh, but that's not fair. That's not this, but it does create flexibility. Just like Councilmember Moshe said, it does create an ability to participate even when you're out of town. And so, I think that's something we should definitely look at. But I'm not 100% sold which way I feel about council participation. I know personally, I would love to be able to still participate when I'm out of town. So that's kind of where I'm leaning as an individual, but I'm curious to see where people land on that.
Councilmember Fahey.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm agreeing with everything that's been said, I guess. I think the whole hybrid concept just increases accessibility for everyone for a myriad of reasons. But if you have a physical disability, a language disability or difference, caregiving, as Mayor Pro Tem Maloney and I both have, taking care of children. You don't want to be exposed to something that you're going to pass on to someone else. I love the idea of having the option of doing everything remotely or in person. So I would go for the whole option.
Councilmember Lay.
Yeah, I think what Councilmember Fahey said is right. I have enjoyed the increased participation, not just people being able to see us and hear us, but to be able to interact with us and provide information and that we can use. It's been remarkably helpful. So I don't know that anybody is, it sounds like we've got unanimity on that. I'm torn a little bit on the hybrid piece, only because I think I think we talked about this 2 years ago, there is something different about being there as opposed to not. I think the value of being able to do this in a hybrid way, I think wasn't as apparent to me then as it is now. I think there are going to be these waves of variants that are going to make people, I think, more or less willing to be in a public place. So I think flexibility is a good thing. I think, certainly some of the things I've learned, and I think the rest of us have learned about EDI, suggests that the more ways we can make it easier to serve, not only on council, but elsewhere, are a good thing. And one of the things that stands in the way frequently is childcare and sometimes mobility. All those things are really helped by, I think, having the ability to do hybrid meetings. There's good guidance out there, I think, around hybrid meetings. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, as many have, with my own law firm and how we do that. So I think there are probably some best practices we could take advantage of. And so I'm in favor of doing it. I think it's one of those things that I would say maybe we come back and revisit after a few months of doing it. I would like, to hear, maybe not a few months, maybe 6 months. I mean, if for some reason we have some council members on, some council members off, it would be good, I think, to to understand not only how those people feel about being, away or on Zoom rather than being in person, but potentially how the public feels, because we're representing them. I don't know, they have a feeling one way or another. It may not matter, or it may matter. I don't know. So whatever we do, I think I'd like to call it up after about 6 months just to see whether we're all still cool with it. I think the other thing is we haven't really talked about what things are going to be like when we go back to the council chamber too much. And I don't know, Mayor, whether it's a good time to chat about that or not. Whether we're going to do, whether we're going to socially distance, whether masks are going to be required or suggested or any of that. But I think giving people a good expectation is never a bad thing. We're probably, I would expect we're not going to necessarily card everybody coming in. So anyway, I'd be interested in what others think about that too.
So masks are not required in city facilities right now. So if there's any expectation from members that those types of things would be happening, this would be the time to bring those up. City Clerk Muse. You're muted.
Just going along with what you said, there's no other city service that we're currently requiring any restrictions or have any restrictions on. So, seniors are getting together for lunch, rec center, there's no limits on the number of people in classes. So it would be unusual citywide to have one thing that we're requiring something different for.
I think from a collegial standpoint, if we want to have, a jacket code or a mask code or something amongst one another, I think we can come up with a collegial rule, or if we all, agree to COVID test ahead of the meeting amongst one another, I think we could all come to that conclusion with one another, but I don't think we could extend it to the rest of the group. I have been advocating for this position for about 2 years, so I'm very heartened to hear that this is where we're going. I think this is a great idea. I think we need, before our next meeting, to have, if we could have the rules change on our consent agenda for our April meeting, or even if it could come, sooner than that, if we have a meeting between now and then, so that we can do what has been described by council members and not be breaking our rules. I think that would be productive. I think it's a pretty straightforward rules change. I would ask the city attorney if, we had quite a lot of debate around quasi-judicial hearings in this. Now there's 2 years of people doing quasi-judicial hearings, and I don't know of any litigation that's occurred over electronic hearings, but I don't follow it that closely. I just wonder if we need to consider anything in that realm with our rules change, or even if council members can be in different positions during a hearing or not.
So Mayor, I'm not aware of any litigation, and certainly virtual online hearings have become the norm across all levels of government and judicial systems. So I think if anything, there's probably far less risk now than there was in the beginning when we were first talking about having quasi-judicial hearings remotely. I think one of the things that that council should probably think about and talk about is, members of the public will be able to attend remotely. Council members, it sounds like you want to be able to have that option to attend remotely. But what about applicants for various, either land use applicants or otherwise? Would you like for them to be able to attend remotely if that's their choice as well?
I believe that's the direction that we're going, yes.
Okay, great.
Yes. So it seems like there's consensus on those points and bringing back a rules change to make it effective so we can do this. I have a technology need to be able to accommodate what we've described. So I had, at one of the hearings we did in person, a separate monitor, like a secondary monitor on the dais. So I would be able to see all of the different things, to be able to call on everyone and see everything. If it would be actually much better if that could be installed as a monitor flat on the tabletop, like in the surface of the dais, so that I could still see the audience members of the public. I don't know if other people have technology needs, but I feel like it's obviously not a limitation that needs to be resolved by the next meeting. But I think in the long run, having that with a flat surface monitor and the laptop, then you could still see the members of the public and not be blocked by the secondary monitor that is now necessary to enable this remote option. If other people have technology needs, that I feel like this would be a good time to identify them so staff can start thinking through how to accommodate those types of things that will need to facilitate this. Councilmember Lay.
Mayor, I wholeheartedly support you in whatever technology needs you need to run the meeting. I think that I'd like to have that too, only because I do think that it even without the even without another member of council being on Zoom, there's still advantages. There's still information, seeing who's up and so forth helps the rest of us as well kind of monitor what's going on. So I sure would love that possibility too. The other thing I was going to say, I should have probably mentioned this before, but are we going to have any sort of rule? I just don't know whether this rule exists right now, but any sort of rule that if people, if people have tested positive for the virus, that, they go online or participate that way as opposed to coming to council chambers. That for us, I think all of us would presumably do that without question. I think probably most people in the community would do that too. But I still have some question. It just would be nice to enshrine that somewhere so that there's just never a question.
So other folks will need to respond on that too. I know there were a lot of hands before that comment came up, but if people can loop that into your comments as well, we can cover both. Councilmember Dickinson.
Yeah, no, I think it is gonna be interesting. I took a picture. I don't know if it'll come through, but like my world of city council has totally changed, right? Like I have the monitor with the monitor and I have the packet above and I have like so much. And so it'll be, I noticed the one time I went back that it was kind of awkward to suddenly not have some of the tools that I've been using to be, present and aware and all that stuff. But I think what's most important is, your ability to run the meeting. But I was thinking, having a monitor that we can see, that again, sort of like if the Zoom is live on a monitor, that we can see where you're able to look up and be like, well, I can see that hand is raised kind of thing. But yeah, it's a brave new world, right? Like how do we stay engaged in this virtual world when we have a live audience in front of us? And I think that will be difficult. And I certainly don't want a monitor in front of me breaking the view with the people in the room. And so there's maybe some smarter people that can think about how you lay that out. But I do think there's something to be said for some sort of low technology that'll allow, or we just adjust back. I think, I don't think I'm being that helpful, but just in going through the process for me, that, I brought a laptop to every meeting before this, but it was just a laptop on my desk that was pretty low. And then I had a pad of paper. And so I could do both things. I could bring out the packet and still have a pad of paper. And that might be enough. But I think I would need to be able to see then the Zoom out there, because I wouldn't want to be going between the packet and the Zoom on my computer. So I think for me, the solution would just be something there, but you might need more for an interactive ability, but that's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Councilmember Dickinson. Councilmember Most.
Yeah, I agree. I think the answer in terms of being able to allow us to see people that are on the Zoom, and I would hope that I know we haven't done this to this point, but I would hope that if we are going to build this as a hybrid system going forward, even if we can't do this to start, that we would get to the point where anybody who is signing in digitally, that they can come up and show their video while they're speaking. So I would hope that we could get to a point to do that. So that's something I would love to see. It's not, an immediate requirement, but I think it's something if we're thinking about going forward long term. And I guess what I would like to see is, a couple, I know when we had that one meeting in the council chambers, there were like screens on the side of the wall, but it would be nice to get at least one good high res monitor that we can all see from the dais that doesn't impact the public view of us or people who are getting a camera view of us. And whether that's one or two of those, maybe they have to be hung from the ceiling. I don't know, but I think that's really the answer is, I agree with Council Member Dickinson. I don't want anything else in front of my face. I also use two monitors while I'm doing this, but I would hope that we can, each operate with one. But so that would be our request, to have some kind of, decent resolution screen where we can see people, and that anybody who happens to be hybrid remote, and that we are allowing or encouraging, or I don't know, requiring even people who are going to speak publicly digitally at our meetings to actually turn their screens, turn their video cameras on if they have access to one, so that we can actually see them, because I think that's also valuable.
Councilmember Brown.
Thanks, Mayor. I appreciate it. I supportive of moving back to in-person meetings. I'm supportive of allowing the public to both attend in person as well as remotely. I support council members being able to participate either remotely or at the dais, although I'm sure we all will do our best to be in person as much as we can. I think that's an important part of our kind of accessibility. And I know everyone will do that, so that's but having the opportunity, like if one of us gets sick, right, we could still potentially participate, but do that in the interest of public health and not spread disease. The only thing that I'll say is I won't support any different requirements for the council chambers as we have in other city facilities. So, if you go to the rec center and there are certain requirements about masks or vaccines or being tested or whatever, then those same requirements should hold in city council chambers.
So I have an unfair question. Maybe I was going to pose it to you, Councilmember Brown, just because I know you're very tuned in with the Colorado state government. Do you know if there's any requirement currently around a positive test result in isolation? Like, do you know the contemporary rule on that, or does anyone on staff know the contemporary rule on that?
Are you talking about in state capital? Like, are you barred from being in the state capital or something along those lines?
Just if there's, I know that the state lifted most of the regulations around COVID, and I know the county has lifted all of the county requirements, but I just wondered if there was anything that remained in place around a positive test result. And
I mean, there's still isolation requirements. There's still isolation and quarantine recommendations from public health officials. But in terms of whether those are actual formal rules or if there are any requirements for testing, I mean, even state employees, there is a vaccination or test requirement, or there has been up until this point, but the state is now dropping the testing requirements, and employees are only required to attest to their vaccination status one way or the other. But there's no requirement to be tested to come into one of our city or our state buildings. So.
Thank you. City Manager Durbin.
Thank you, Mayor. I would concur with what Councilmember Brown was just saying as far as requirements. There's certainly recommendations, and some organizations have requirements for employees, but in terms of the general public moving out and about, I'm not aware of any requirements like that. I also would just add that I'll work with the city clerk. I think we need to schedule some time with each one of you individually in the council chambers to talk about what kind of technology you're hoping for. Heard a lot of good thoughts and observations that you're talking about. But if we can get you in the room and get that stuff dialed in with supply chain issues, April 5th may be tough. We may not get there. And so on that point, I'd just like to ask for a little bit of patience as we move through this. There will be some speed bumps as we move into this. I can assure you that this will work. I've done hybrid meetings, both in terms of council and public, like you're talking about here in both Frisco and Fraser, and they can work, but there are some technology challenges and it's different. So we'll figure out those bumps, but it may take us a couple meetings.
City Clerk Muse?
Oh, yeah, the only thing I wanted to add is you are not the only users of that room. So any changes we make to that dais will affect a number of other boards who use it, and that is meeting space in City Hall. So whatever we do, it may not be exactly what you want, because the room needs to be used for other things. So we have to make sure it's functional for many different purposes. So I will say too, when we last scheduled the upgrade to council chambers, it took us almost 8 months to get on their schedule. So this could be a not immediate fix. It could be a 2023 fix if everything goes slowly. So just so you're prepared to see how long it takes.
Councilmember Light?
Yeah, question for the city manager. What happens right now if there's somebody who comes to work and I don't know, they come to work and they've tested positive? Have you had any of that happen yet?
Yes, we have.
What do you do?
I understand at this point, we don't have any employees who are positive, which is great news. It's been a while. And we have a policy in place. Deputy City Manager Davis is a little bit more dialed in on that than I am, but with our employees, we can certainly send them home. Megan, maybe you can address the specifics of our policy for us.
Yeah, we do require employees who have tested positive to go home and to stay home. And I think we are now consistent with the CDC. It's 5 days is the isolation or the quarantine requirement before they can return to work.
Yeah, I mean, I think I understand. I'm not sure whether Councilmember Brown's comment was inconsistent with mine, but I don't think we should be any, it's a workplace that we're being. It's also a public forum. I also don't think we should be less, I don't know, at least have fewer rules than we might have if somebody came there with who was for lack of a better term, very sick with COVID. I don't know that that's ever going to happen. I mean, maybe this is just one of those things we'll have to deal with on a situation by situation basis. But we got to try to make our not just workspace, but the public space there as at least as safe from that one issue as it would typically be. I just don't know, I don't know that we can really write rules around that or not, but we may just have to see how that goes. We're not going to test anybody. We're not going to require vaccination status or prohibit anybody from being a part of it. We wouldn't prohibit anybody from being a part of a meeting regardless, because we have other means of letting them participate. But I guess I'm thinking of a situation. I suppose maybe the other thing is if a council member is really concerned about somebody, they can go in the middle of a meeting and log on to a computer and leave the meeting that way. I don't know. But again, I'm responding to the comment that Council or Pro Tem made. But at any rate, I'm fine, I think, dealing with it on a case-by-case basis. I don't want to discriminate against members of the public. I don't want to even really discriminate against, one disease versus another. It could just as well be somebody coming in with pneumonia as COVID. But we do know that COVID's often more deadly than that. I don't know whether anyone else has any thoughts about that or not, but I'm willing to go with the majority's view about that.
So it seems like there's consensus to have staff bring back a rules change to allow hybrid participation for all members in the meeting, and to enforce, whatever the contemporary public health standards are that would be enforced in this type of a setting. So as things change, like we've seen health measures come into effect, go out of effect, come into effect, go out of effect. So we'll just continue to ask staff to monitor what those are from public health. And I'm sure we'll have to continue talking about that as things continue to change in the coming months. But I think we have consensus on the path forward. And then staff will work with each individual to see if there are technology needs to facilitate just a better functioning of the meeting. And they'll do that on a one-on-one basis. All right. Any other discussion on this topic? Councilmember Lay.
Only that I think we've got a member of the public who has raised his hand.
So we took public comment on this topic and we're past that point. And it just, I'm happy to have a council vote to change the rules and do something different. It's just that we do have like a set of rules that I do try to follow equally on every topic. And so that is how we run the meeting. And so I think since we have direction on that one, we will go on to our next topic, which is building code updates. This is ordinance number 1825, series 2022, an ordinance adopting by reference the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code as an alternative for rebuilding structures significantly damaged or destroyed by the Marshall Fire. This is our first reading and we'll set the public hearing for the 5th of April, 2022. Is there a second? I move that. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
I'll second it, but I also have a question, Mayor. So the direction that we gave staff on this actually came out different than when this was actually written. And what I'm referring to, I talked about a 3-year period for getting a building permit to be able to work on this program. And actually this is a 2-year. And so, I can make a motion to change that at the next hearing.
Let's leave it as moved and seconded, and we'll ask staff for some second reading amendments to be brought forward to clarify the point for some options on second reading.
Thank you.
Any other additional information folks need for second reading? And of course, you can still ask for it between first and second reading in an email to staff. Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor of setting the public hearing for the 5th of April, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. And next we have, I will move we approve ordinance number 1826, series 2022, and ordinance amending chapter 1505 of the Lewisville Municipal Code to remove the requirement for fire sprinkler systems from the International Residential Code. This is our first reading and we'll set the public hearing for the 5th of April, 2022. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor of setting the public hearing for the 5th of April, 2022, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. That takes us to ordinance number 1827, series 2022. I'll move that we approve this ordinance, an ordinance amending city sales and use tax code concerning economic nexus and marketplace facilitators. This is our first reading and we'll set the public hearing for the 5th of April, 2022. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of setting the public hearing for the 5th of April, 2022, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. That takes us to our consent agenda items that we've removed and put on the regular agenda. First, we have consent agenda item D, which I asked to have removed, which is approval of resolution 15, series 2022, a resolution approving a services agreement with Flock Group Incorporated for a license plate detection software and hardware. And so I don't know if staff would like to talk about this at all, but I'll just sort of describe why I asked for this to be removed. And I just need to pull up my notes on my third monitor. So sorry about that. while I pull them up. So I asked for this to be removed because I think we need some additional information and council discussion on this topic before we're ready to approve this contract. So I'm very grateful that the police are thinking of creative solutions to reduce crime and looking for ways to use technology to streamline their operations. What's been proposed is to install some license plate detection software in areas around the community to be able to reduce crime. And I just, as soon as I can pull up these questions. So I have read some different articles from different sources, including the ACLU on this topic. And I just wanted to have some council discussion. And I think we need some additional information to facilitate that discussion. So I would hope we could bring this back for adoption at a later date with some discussion around, I'm happy to add into the packet this ACLU report on this particular type of surveillance and mass surveillance, but the information I would hope we could get is more information on how much control we have over the length of time we store this data for. In public surveillance, I would recommend that we significantly reduce the amount of time that we store this data for from 30 down to, I would propose 5 days or some low number of days. I would like to propose that we do not compare the data against hot lists, that we don't share the data with any third-party groups, that the cameras won't be networked, and that there's additional training information provided to us around how officers who have access to this data will be trained in using it. I think there are some Fourth Amendment concerns around this type of mass surveillance and where we install these cameras specifically. Like, I think we need to understand if we're surveilling everyone in the community or if they're located in specific secure sites. And so I believe we need a map of where the cameras will be installed, and then just some additional information on what our protocols around the collection and type of information we'll be gathering and how we'll be utilizing this in our investigation. So I just think there's some more information we need to understand, that we have all the policies we need in place to facilitate approving this contract. If council disagrees, that's absolutely appropriate, and you all could move forward with approving it tonight, but there's just some additional information I feel like we need, and some additional discussion I think we need to have before making this kind of a surveillance decision. Councilmember Most?
This happens to be my area of professional expertise, so I'm going to weigh in a little bit here. I object to implementing any kind of surveillance system that spans the entire community. When I first talked about this, finding technology, I think the city manager mentioned something about this, and I had mentioned that we no longer had the staff or could afford the staff to have the burned areas of our community with police stationed at the entrances to each of those areas because of cost and staff constraints, that there was technology for that. And I do believe this technology is appropriate in those circumstances. I object, having spent the last 20 years in the digital identity world, I object to any kind of, community-wide surveillance being installed in this way. What I do believe makes sense, and I think the mayor has addressed some of the concerns. There are, well-known best practices to address the collection and data storage and management of this type of data. And while the company is claiming this is not PII or personally identifiable information, I would argue that license plates is adjacent, at the very least, to PII, and that we have to be very careful about it. What I do support and what I do believe can be useful to our community is to install readers, license plate readers, that where we can read license plates of people accessing the closed, secure, permit-only areas of our community. I think the reason this is going to be really critical is, as time goes by, there's going to be more and more people going in and out as construction happens. And I could see us even upping this capability to something that was even more secure in terms of providing QR codes similar to what we did with Ascent, where we can have automated readers. We might want to actually enroll individual people from different companies that we're having access. And I have no objection to that, as long as it is limited to secure areas and where we clearly post that if you enter that secure area, your license plate is going to be read. And so we make it absolutely clear that this is happening. This technology should never be used without people understanding that they are being subject to it, and that we should be very clear. We should make, whether it's on the community website or through the police department, that we are very clear about the way we're using this data, the way the data is being stored and managed, who has access to it, and those kind of things. And we have clear policies that people can find and access and understand, and that we actually run this by whether it's our city attorney or whether we need to get specialized input from someone who focuses on privacy. But this is not to be taken lightly, and I think it's a useful tool, as long as we are applying best practices and make sure that we are doing our best to minimize the potential invasiveness of this technology and the data that we're capturing.
Thank you, Councilmember Most. Councilmember Lay.
No, this is very useful, and thanks, Councilmember Most, because I know that you do have the expertise. It's been nice being able to get that applied right here. I think if I'd like to know maybe a little bit, well, a couple of things. One is we've got people whose properties are potentially at risk, and we need to do something to make sure that is taken care of. And I am virtually certain that there is no Fourth Amendment concern about keeping track of who goes in and out of the burn areas in order to protect the property. But I don't want to spend too much time making decisions. I have no problem with gathering some more information about this, but we do have citizens that need whose property needs protecting, and I think this seems to me to be a pretty reasonable way to do it. I think it would be helpful to find out from perhaps the chief a little bit about where this has been used in other communities that have had disasters of various sorts, whether in Colorado or elsewhere, and whether this is kind of a best practice to use this sort of technology. I imagine he probably has looked into this or wouldn't have suggested it, but I think that maybe providing that to council, along with anything else that I think the mayor suggested, there's some material, and there may be some information that Councilmember Most may think appropriate to produce here too. I think the other thing is, although I have, because I do privacy work myself, have some concerns about kind of long-term issues relating to wide dispersal of this technology. I don't want to make any decision here that is overly broad or unnecessarily broad and categorical that doesn't deal with the issue at hand. And the primary issue at hand, as I read the request, is those areas that are that have been affected by the fire. So I don't think although there's reasons to do policies and procedures, and I think that's all good for the police. They don't want any more discretion than we actually give them. I don't think there's any need at this point to do something that's broad, and I don't think I want to task our city attorney with a huge project, nor do I want to task the others in city staff with that kind of project. So that would be my caveats.
Thanks, Councilmember Lay. And are you okay with that information coming back with the rest of the information we're asking him back? It wasn't clear from the way that you asked the question if you were going to hear that tonight or if you're looking for that to come back.
Oh, I think we have, you had mentioned some material you were interested in providing, and I think there probably is other stuff. I just don't want, I want to maybe give them a date certain by which we get this back,
Sure.
so we make a decision, and that
Sure.
we have some plan in place in the meantime so that there's no lapse in security.
Sure. Thank you very much, Councilmember Lay. And I agree that there is urgency to making the decision. And I think we have some different information between you and me on the locations of the cameras. That sounds like we're making different decisions based on that information. So I think having the information around where we intend to put cameras is important in the discussion so that we all have a similar basis of information. Councilmember Fahey?
Thank you. Yes, I'm going to agree with what you just said. I like the idea of giving the police the flexibility to use this tool, but in a very limited way. I know when before the fire, there was some discussion in the Enclave neighborhood about doing a community watch program, and this topic was brought up. And there was a lot of discussion and no resolution about whether or not we should have one of these cameras at the entrance to the Enclave. And so I would be in support of doing this as quickly as possible for the burn areas that are closed, but not citywide and not on any long-term basis.
Councilmember Brown?
Mayor, thank you. And thank you for your leadership on this issue and for pulling this off the consent agenda. I think there are legitimate privacy concerns and concerns about surveillance that we need to address. I think having more information about the locations and how and putting some reasonable limits around how the information is used is warranted. And so I think the steps that you have outlined is excellent. I'd be happy to support that. I am also fully aware of Councilmember Lay's concern. I completely support his concern about about expediting this process. We do not need this to carry on, but I do believe we're going to be meeting very regularly. So I believe that we can get this information very quickly and put it on an agenda. If not for Monday, then the following Tuesday or something along those lines. So.
Thank you. And I just want to reiterate, I am really appreciative of the police department of using creativity and trying to come up with solutions for the problems that we have. I think this is one of those issues where there are just some things I think we need to work through and make sure we have policies in place so it matches community expectations of how we would do this. So I really appreciate everybody working through these issues and trying to do it quickly. The one topic that didn't seem to come up through the discussion that I still have in my notes is just around the failure rate. I think I found online that there's about a 10% failure rate with this particular technology. It may have been in the packet, but it may have been online. And that's quite a high failure rate. If you think about 100,000 cars coming through an area a day, that you're misidentifying 10,000 cars, it's quite high. And so this is just a tool. It is not like the ultimate answer. And I think we need to understand how we'll use that data with such a high failure rate. If you think about mail, like what if 10% of the mail went to the wrong place? Like that would just be a total failure. It's nowhere close to Six Sigma. So anyway, I really wonder about the high failure rate and whether this is creating a sense of security that doesn't exist. And so I share the concern around the security of the closed areas, but I'm not sure if this actually buys us what we're paying for, or if this buys a perception of security. So it's just something to think about. Councilmember, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney, and then Councilmember Most.
Thank you for recognizing me. The reason for doing this is something, it's the safety of the community, right? And so I think we can all agree that is a good reason, and I appreciate the police department bringing this forward as a concept of doing that. But I also believe there are privacy issues. We have to weigh all of this. And so I would like to say, yes, this is going to be a rock solid solution that's going to provide security, especially for those areas that have been burned. And we're going to have hundreds of houses potentially under construction at the same time. And so this may be a good idea. There may be other ideas, but to me, weighing the purpose of this with the privacy issues, it's not something I feel like I have enough information on yet to be able to support approving this contract. So I do look forward to us doing this in a quick manner and for a particular purpose. And that is really for protecting the areas that have been identified. Thank you.
Councilmember Moss.
Okay, Mayor, just to address your issue on the accuracy rate, this is something that is an issue across the board with all kinds of identification technology, right? And I understand as a scientist in particular that you approach it from the perspective, oh, if it's not 100% accurate, then we have all these failure rates. But the way that you have to actually contextualize it correctly in terms of these sort of technologies that are supporting technologies is not the failure rate, but the recognition rate. So in other words, if you had a human being standing out there trying to figure out whether those license plates were good or bad, there's a lot of time that takes, and there are ways to do it where you can punch them in and look it up, but there's a lag associated with that. When you're talking about trying to provide access, capturing 90% of the license plates correctly is actually really, really valuable. So you have to look at, when you're evaluating these sort of technologies, you have to look at it in terms of the added value of what you're capturing, not holding it up to 100%, because there is literally no technology, identification technology, that works 100% of the time. And what happened over time in evaluating a lot of these technologies is they compared it to humans, right? And even humans punching in license plate numbers will punch in the wrong numbers sometimes. So you have to look at it in terms of the added value it brings from a security perspective. It is nothing it's not going to be 100% accurate. It never will be. And so it's certainly not perfect, but it is a tool that actually, what they find is they work generally a lot better than human recognition and with the error rates that humans make. So that's how to contextualize it, not the fear of, oh my God, it's, there's all these false, false metrics, failures to accurately produce it. You have to look at it in terms of what it's bringing to the table in an additive way, not in a subtractive way.
Thank you, Councilmember Moss. Councilmember Lay.
Yeah, maybe one way of adding to what Councilmember Mose just said is something that I'm pretty fond of saying, which is it takes a theory to beat a theory. And if we care about the safety of the people and more importantly, the property that we're trying to protect, it's important that we do so in the best way we can. If this doesn't work for some reason, or there's a better way, or there's a more cost-effective way, I'm certainly all for that. And maybe one thing that that staff could do would be to at least provide us a little bit with a comparison of what it would cost to do it another way. If these are the two ways, if the two ways of doing it are to have an officer stationed in these places, what is that going to cost? And I presume that we will be able to get some information about what the false positives and what the vendor thinks is likely to happen there. So we ought to be able to come up with at least that. I think that's the kind of thing that would assure the public that we're not taking, shall we say, liberties with their civil liberties, because I think those are important concerns. But I also want to make sure we get what we need to out of this, and because it is going to be a pretty significant period of time that we're going to have to watch these properties in some manner or means. Thanks.
Any members of the public care to comment on this topic this evening? First, we have RJ Harrington.
Thank you, Mayor. RJ Harrington, 457 East Rain Tree Court. Deeply appreciate you pulling this off the consent agenda for many of the reasons that have already been stated amongst all of you counselors. Thank you very, very much. I also understood this proposal to be predominantly about safety and security for the neighborhoods that got impacted by the Marshall Fire. However, with the discussion around locations, may I please call your attention to paragraph 2.7.1 in the agreement between Flock and the city. Flock shall have final discretion on location of units. Now, there's a little bit of context in that paragraph as well, but that sentence says what it says. Flock gets to decide, at least in this agreement, not the city. Thank you very much.
Any other members of the public care to comment on this topic this evening? Seeing none, take it back for council discussion. Councilmember Lay.
Sorry, that's just a legacy hand.
Residual hand. All right, I think we've given some good direction. Any final comments from folks? Councilmember Most.
Just to address RJ's concern, I know that this is not like, we're not supposed to be doing this dynamically, but I think it's a really important question. The reason why you have to allow the vendor to have the location is because they have to basically be able to position the camera to be able to best capture the license plate. But given that, the vicinity of the locations or the locations where you're trying to identify plates is different than the final location position of the camera. So I think we need to, if we haven't distinguished that in this contract, we need to clearly distinguish it in that contract, right? Camera placement within the vicinity of specific areas where we are capturing license plates. I think that distinction is really important.
Thank you, Councilmember Bruce. I think we asked for a lot of good information to come back when we discuss this again. And I appreciate Councilmember Most and Councilmember Lay's perspective that they've brought forward on some of these topics. I have a different opinion on the accuracy and how this information has been used and failed. I also have a difference of opinion on whether it's an accurate comparison to have, having a police person stationed in an area has a different effect and potential outcomes than having a license plate camera capture data. And I don't think they're comparable things. I don't think you'd have comparable outcomes. But one thing I will send to council members to watch is a video that I saw on the news last year that has stuck with me greatly, which was 4 little girls in Aurora that were held at gunpoint on the pavement because police officers were given a license plate number from one of these cameras and told that the vehicle was stolen. And the officers put a 12-year-old little girl on the pavement for quite a long time. And you can watch her scream on the video. And it was terrible and it stuck with me. And like when you see something like that, you can see failure modes in the technology when people aren't trained properly. Because I mean, I know that there should have been training in place that talked about the failure rate, and there should have been training in place that talked about how the data was used, and there should have been procedures in place that talked about like, when you get a license plate, do you arrest a little girl in that manner? I think you all need to watch the video because it certainly impacted how I viewed this contract. Just to see one of the potential failures caught on video live, I found it very disturbing. So I'll send that to you to watch, and I think we'll have a good conversation. Any other comments or data needs when we discuss this next time? All right. Thank you, everyone. That takes us to our next topic on the agenda, which is item E from the consent agenda, which is award contract for the 2022 concrete replacement project. And so I want to thank staff for putting this together. I don't know if you want to make any general comments about it, but the reason I took this off consent agenda is there's a new concrete project that was added that I'm very excited for, which is there's a section of trail that has been flooding since the flood. The water patterns in the spring have changed along Coal Creek. And so it's been washing out a section of trail every year. So the staff have identified, since we got really good pricing on concrete, that they've added in this section to try to address that issue. And I think that that's innovative, and I'm glad that they're thinking outside the box on things like this. I would just want to have a discussion with council tonight about a section of trail that we have previously identified that is problematic, that council has talked about, where we created a bisected section of trail to try to have half crusher fines and half concrete, to try to sort of be a compromise, best of both worlds. And since that's been installed, it's been very problematic. There have been crusher fines on the concrete section of trail. You consistently see people that have crashed their bicycles on that section by hitting the lip of concrete, or conflicts between the walkers and the cyclists because there's not really enough space for the trail where we've done it. And so we tried something, it didn't go as we had envisioned, and I think that we should correct it as we've identified. And since the concrete pricing is favorable this year, I think we should add that section in, since it's been identified as a issue area that's creating crashes. And so that's the section of Coal Creek Trail along Aspen Way, between Community Park and the trailhead there. So if there could be discussion about that topic, I would love to discuss it. Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
I completely agree. I brought this up in, I think, 2019, right after it was built, that it was a concern. So I agree. I think we should add that. I don't know what the cost will be. It certainly will be in the lines of some of the other Front Street or the Coal Creek Trail rehabilitation. So I would like to see that added to this particular contract. Another one that I've brought up over time as well is going the Coal Creek Trail going from Dillon Road west to US 36. I don't know if that needs to be added this year, but I want it for consideration in future years, at least being an alternate. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Any other questions or comments from folks on this one? And then we'll go to the public. Council Member Maloney. I mean, Mayor, Council Member Brown, sorry, all your names are on my screen in different places.
Yes, it's fine. Dennis and I, whatever. We're both from Ward 3, whatever.
The other Ward 3 guy.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I just want to support Mayor, your suggestion to add this particular section, and as well as the Mayor Pro Tem echoing it. So as this section in Ward 3, I really appreciate you raising that. And I think my son taught me this. They do this in their class where they go same. I don't know. Anyway, that's probably all I probably should have said. But anyway, yes, great.
Thank you. Any members of the public care to comment on this agenda topic this evening? Josh Cooperman.
Hi, this is Josh Cooperman. I live at 216 Griffith Street. I'm definitely supportive of the city maintaining its infrastructure. And in particular, I'm very supportive of the Front Street sidewalk project. I think it'd be great to have that stretch of sidewalk. On my gravel bike, I don't feel like I run into the problems that the mayor was talking about, but it seems like a good portion to work out as well. I wanted to comment on two other things. So one is about the bump outs. It's kind of minor, but I didn't really follow what went on when we were thinking about sort of more creative bump outs in the last year or so, and then they all just got bricked over. I thought it would have been nice to at least have planted some plants in the bump outs instead of just making a hard surface. It's not a lot of surface, but it adds up. It would absorb a little bit less heat from the sun, and it would provide a little bit of habitat for insects and so forth. So, if we could think about just making those planters instead of covering them with concrete, that would be nice. The other thing I wanted to comment on looking ahead is the the work on 104th Street. And I want to pick up on something that I've mentioned before. So 104th Street, I bicycle that every so often, and I agree that it could use some maintenance. It has some large medians or fairly large medians in a few different places where basically they're just yellow lines around tarmac in the center of the street, which are never used. And I think it would be great if we could do a little bit of road diet there, where we rip out the tarmac in those medians because it doesn't get used, and we plant something there. It would be nice if we could plant trees because then they would provide some shade. But of course, trees need water. And so that seems a little bit difficult. But, even if we could just rip out the tarmac in those medians and plant some native grasses that don't really need to be watered, but they look nice and they would provide some habitat, I think that would be great. And then it would also reduce the amount of road that is absorbing heat over in that part of the city. I think that would be a nice way to try to start a wider road diet effort in the city. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much for your comments. Any other members of the public care to comment on this topic? Seeing none, that takes us back over for council discussion, comments, motions, or action. Any council discussion? Or proposed motions? Councilmember Brown?
I'll go, thank you, Mayor. I'll go ahead and move, if I can find the agenda item. See, I don't have two screens, and clearly I should, now that I know that everybody else does. I'll move that we approve the 2-year extension. No, sorry, the 2020. Let's start over again. I'm sorry, it's embarrassing. I'm going to move that we approve the contract for the 2022 concrete replacement project with the additional projects that you highlighted on Aspen and that gravel thing over there. How's that?
Yeah,
Will that
great.
work?
That's very clear. Thank you, Councilmember Brown. Is there a second?
Is that a technical term? I will second that motion.
It's like the worst motion in the history of Lewisville.
That's why I wanted to second it.
It's just fine. You guys are just fine. Any other discussion of the motion as proposed? I just want to say to Director Coer on the bump outs, I know that you worked really hard to try to find community support and innovative ideas around art and plantings and other things in those bump outs. And so I think as community members have ideas, to go ahead and email those in and continue to tell us those. We just were not able to get enough community participation on the art program to make that a reality last time. And so I do think the staff came up with a really nice looking, clean solution, but it's not what we had hoped for when we tried to do something more creative. So thank you for those comments. Any other discussion on the motion? City Clerk, could we please have a roll call on the motion?
Stolzman?
Yes.
Councilmember Lay?
Yes.
Councilmember Fahey?
Yes.
Councilmember Mo?
Yes.
Councilmember Dickinson?
Yes.
Councilmember Brown?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Maloney?
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. That takes us to our city attorney's report.
Thank you, Mayor. I have no report.
Thank you. That takes us to our council comments, committee reports, and identification of future agenda items. Are there any committee reports from council members this evening? Mayor Pro Tem Maloney.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to let everybody know on Monday, the 21st, the Finance Committee will be meeting from 4 to 6. And we have 2 very important agenda items. The first will be the 2021 financials. And so we'll be looking at what we believe will be very close to the actuals, which will give us a lot of ideas about how we performed in all the revenue and expense areas. But it'll also give us an idea of what our general fund balance is that we will need to be able to backfill a lot of the additional costs in 2022 related to the Marshall Fire. The second important topic is we're going to be reviewing the 2022 CIP list. And so we'll be looking at that as a review, but also looking at it for priorities. We know we're not going to be able to accomplish all the things this year. And so this will be a first discussion by the Finance Committee. Obviously, that will have to come to the whole council, but we'll try to get a sense of a proposal as something that council can at least look at as a starting point for discussion. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Maloney. Councilmember Lay.
Yeah, we covered in our consent agenda, the contract concerning the Lewisville Revitalization Commission's request for someone to facilitate retreat that we're going to have. If those, and that's kind of a visioning retreat. And I think to the extent that you all have some ideas, thoughts, concerns about those, please let me know. And I'm glad to take those into that. We haven't scheduled it at all yet, but we will. And I think we're working on the schedule now. The other part is that there will be a portion of it that will involve council, joint meeting. And I think we're sort of thinking about that in June. But think, if there's some ideas that you'd like to share in advance, I'm glad to hear. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Fahey.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to let you know that CC4CA has approved a handful of various bills that are proceeding through the capital process down in Denver. And they're looking for anyone who would be interested in testifying or writing an op-ed or anything else regarding these bills. So if you are at all interested, let me know and I'll send you a list of all of the opportunities.
Thank you, Councilmember Fahey. I don't know if everyone on council remembers probably 3 years ago when council approved some of the railroad quiet zone project measures that council gave the authority to the mayor to sign different contracts that were consistent with that direction. So things didn't have to keep coming back to council for all these amendments. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was in the loop that we're getting very close. I don't want to jinx it, but you probably have seen the double gates on most of the crossings. 3 of the 5 have everything they need. They can't go quiet till they can all go quiet. The last 2, there's just a little bit of work to be done. I signed within the last month an extension to RIGA with CDOT, and then just tonight before the meeting, an amendment with BNSF on some at-grade improvements on Griffith Street. So I would start making time on your calendar that we could go celebrate the silence, hopefully together, because that's been a project staff has been working on and the community has been hoping for a long time. So hopefully we can get that soon. Our Washington, DC trip, which was virtual this year, and I did from this desk. It was virtual last year also, happened this week or last week. I apologize, last week. And we have really good meetings with the delegation and FTA and FRA. Our delegation continues to be supportive of our multimodal vision for this region. We were really advocating for some funding that the county in Longmont and the city of Boulder are going to be applying for on 119. But we absolutely made a pitch for things like Amtrak on peak service and other support for other funds in transit for the region. So that was all really good. And because our delegation's been working so hard with us on the fire, a lot of the fire recovery, a lot of the conversations did morph into discussions because Mayor Folsom was there as well around recovery and efforts and things that we're working on there for funds and approvals and things like that. So that was really good. And probably the most interesting meeting was with Representative Perlmutter because he's retiring. And so he was very open and candid about a number of topics, and he's on the banking committee. So we asked him a lot of questions. Well, I asked him a lot of questions around some of the things they're working on there with inflation and supply chain and some of the other things they're thinking about. So he gave some insight into some interest rate increases and some work that they're trying to do, but the war will definitely have an impact on their ability to do some of the things they were hoping to do. So he gave us some great insight there and some things to stay tuned on and watch out for. I also want to let everyone know that the Dr. Cog tip cycle is happening. And so this is like this is why we go to Dr. Cog twice a month. It all comes down to this. So hopefully we've done a good job facilitating the relationships there and talking through that. So we will be submitting our local projects and working through how those can get funded over the next cycle. So if there are big projects outside of the Highway 42 that we're all kind of thinking about, please identify those sooner than later so we can start making sure. And, we now have our transportation master plan, so those really are identified. But if there are things that are missing, we should make sure we try to incorporate those. And then just last, we're running out of time in the legislative session. I feel like this happens every year. But there have been a few insurance bills, but I was really hoping to see an underinsurance bill, which hasn't been pitched yet. So if everybody could please talk to their friends under the dome about an underinsurance bill this year. If it doesn't, I do believe if it doesn't happen this year, there'll be a really good discussion through the summer and fall, and then there will be one run next year. But it's just so disheartening to know that, if something happened again to another community, or that the issue with underinsurance has not been addressed yet. There have been some strides made. Some of the insurance measures that have been taken would be nice things to have, but we have yet to have reform on the underinsurance issue. So I would ask every council member to write a letter to at least one legislator about that we know this problem exists. They knew it after Waldo Canyon. They knew it after Cameron Peaks. Like, we've got to actually do something this time, and we can do it. So thank you all. Any other committee reports or council comments or identification of future agenda items? Councilmember Lay.
Yeah, I don't want to get into too much what you just said, but are none of our representatives in the State House pushing to create a bill like the one you're talking about?
I think it's around timing and whether it's done this session or not done this session, and whether there's time to get politically to get such a big lift across the finish line this session. I don't want to answer the question the way you asked it, I guess. Are you okay with the answer I've provided so far?
That's fine.
Thank you. Councilmember Fahey.
Thank you. On a totally unrelated topic, I'm just wondering if we could discuss at a future meeting some way that the city of Lewisville could support our friends, comrades, whatever, in Ukraine.
Are council members supportive of adding something about the war in Ukraine on a future agenda topic? I'm seeing a few nods. I need one more. Okay, there we go. So City Manager Durbin, could we add a topic around Councilmember Fahey, how did you want to capture sort of the agenda topic? It's around support for Ukraine.
Yes, somehow provide some kind of support, even if it's only emotional or, but
Thank you.
Some
we'll
kind
have
of
a discussion.
acknowledgement.
We'll have a discussion at a future meeting, and City Manager, and I'm sure he'll talk to everybody individually about ideas around that and brainstorm, and I'll be sure to think up some things too. That's a great topic. Thanks, Councilmember Fahey. Any other council member topics? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.